I'm Jason Allen Ashlock, founder and principal of Movable Type Literary Group. Movable Type Literary Group was founded to meet a need. It's now so well known that authors have for a long time felt neglected or ill-served by their publishers in a variety of ways, whether it's publicity and marketing or just editorial support. And we don't necessarily think that's true all the time, but we think it's true enough of the time that an agency needed to start thinking more expansively about the services it offered to authors. And those services could include editorial work with the manuscript, or could include access to particular digital partners, or to publicity services, or media partners, speaking bureaus, website designers, videographers, whatever team needed to be in place to support the author's launch of their book. That has grown over the last couple of years to really be much more focused on the digital partnerships, of looking at a property the moment it comes in the door to us and asking, what does this property want to be? Sometimes it wants to be born into a beautiful print book, but sometimes it wants to be something else. Sometimes it wants to be two things at once, and it wants to be a print book, but it also wants to live digitally in some form. And so we want to ask questions really early on. We want to think digitally first, and we want to act digitally very early. And that starts with looking at the content and saying, if the content no longer has to be in one container, we can now be free to ask the content, what do you want to be? How would you like to be born? How would you like to be consumed? And so that question now gets to be answered in a variety of ways. What's fun for us is sort of to step back, ask that question, look at our incredible partners, skilled digital production people, and ask them what they might make of this story or this experience or this idea to partner with a print book. Still love the book. We still are in the business because we find something sacred and timeless about the printed word. But we also want to ask, how can people encounter this great idea or this marvelous narrative outside of the container of the book? So it's think digitally early and act digitally early. In general, publishers have been very responsive and welcoming to the ideas we brought to the table. In particular, I would say cookbook publishers, young adult publishers have been the most willing to entertain innovative, almost off-the-wall ideas about what's possible in a digital space that's not possible in print, and how those endeavors can bolster the print initiative, and there can be a reciprocity and a mutuality between what the print publisher is doing and what a digital production team might be doing. But in general, I feel like there's also a lot of realism among publishers about what they're capable of. They don't yet have the infrastructure, and they don't yet have the skilled teams, and that's okay right now. I mean, I think some of them are moving faster than others in building that skill set and finding that talent and hiring it and bringing it in. Some are moving faster than others with outsourcing it and finding the third parties who can stand in the gaps. But for most titles, the print publisher is going to fulfill the functions the print publisher always fulfilled, which will leave a lot on the table. So it's up to an agent to, I think, bring those partnerships to the table already. If a publisher is going to treat most titles as one-offs, and occasionally there'll be a strange digital aberration, but for the most part it will be a print book with an ebook verbatim. It's up to the agent to have the methodology. If a print publisher is not going to have the methodology, we should have it, or we should be building it. So we should have vetted, skilled, tested digital partners who we know are good at particular genres or categories, who we know are good at particular types of interactive digital design, and have them ready to attach to the properties when we're building them. And we have to do it early so that the two properties, when they hit the market, can support one another in their marketing efforts and promotional efforts. So I think methodology is key, and the publishers are building it. They're not there yet. But the agencies, especially the smaller ones and the younger ones, like my own, are able to be, I think, much more nimble with the kinds of partnerships we arrange and the kind of funding that we find and the way that we play with our authors and their team of supporters to do something really unique and customized for that book. A print publisher is just not right now capable of doing that. It doesn't make any sense. It's a waste of energy for them most of the time. We're not sure about the return on investment for a lot of them when they do it. So it's up to the agent to be the outlier, the experimenter, the one sort of taking the lead on digital methodology. I think additionally it seems to me that as publishers have tried to augment their publicity or marketing offerings in-house, the social media challenges of really finding traction, building credibility and authority and influence online for an author they found it to be such a long-term endeavor. It takes years to build a following online, whether it's Facebook or a blog readership or a Twitter following, much less to build authority and eventually influence to where you can convince those followers to buy your book and to pass your book along word of mouth. It takes a very long time. This is time that publishers just don't have. So whereas they used to be very efficient in sending out review copies and getting attention for a book in a short time frame, they can't spend 12 to 18 months with each author holding their hand through a social media strategy that builds their following and at some point in the future leads to a place of influence and platform for their authors. It's just, this type of media doesn't fit what the publishers are good at. And I think to some degree that's okay. There's some things that a publisher are still doing very well. I mean, pre-publication reviews, right? We still rely on them for that. We still rely on them for the amazing job they do, the constant vigilance they have within the book selling community. The independent bookstores and the big accounts and the way they service those accounts. They have to do that. It's where their core skills are, their legacy relationships still really matter, and they're very good at it. And we commend them for it. I think we all just need to some degree, acknowledge what they're not good at, recognize where the failures are, and sense in some way where we can lead to heal that or to bridge that gulf. The agent's role, as I describe it, in the future seems to me to need to be one of radical mediation. An agent standing with the author along every point in the value chain. Whereas it used to be the agent was relegated to a pretty small column of that value chain. The agent now needs to extend their services and their expertise and their leadership across it, from inception to its incarnation in the marketplace. That has naturally led some agencies to reach the point where they have ostensibly become their authors' publishers as well in digital form, particularly for backlist titles that have gone out of print or perhaps were never successfully placed with the publisher. And the agent now, taking this idea of radical mediation seriously, has stepped up and beyond just providing services prior to publication, are now actually providing publication services. I understand the impulse that takes them there, because I think that's in some ways the end result of the idea of radical mediation as an agenting philosophy. On the other hand, I find it a very problematic idea. There are some core agenting philosophies that don't evaporate in the face of innovation. We have to hold on to those. We have to remember why they're there. Over the decades, this philosophy was built of an agent standing next to an author and avoiding conflict of interest questions. It was built for a particular reason, and we have to remember why. And so as we innovate and experiment, we can't necessarily jettison all of those old frameworks simply because we now have opportunity. And the freedom and the opportunity that we're all sprinting toward can, to some degree, handicap, I think, our integrity and our sense of allegiance, full allegiance to the author's best interests. That being said, I do think it is viable and important for agents to think about splitting their model, to having a full representation model which offers classic literary management and negotiating with big publishers and producers for print, film, television, whatever it may be, but being willing to consider a second column with a well-formed Chinese wall between, in which they offer self-publishing consulting services that are maybe fee-based, or maybe in a production model in which they're expending some capital to invest in particular client projects and then getting a much larger take of the return, a 50-50 split or something like that. There's lots of room for experimentation, but we just have to remember that in that experimentation we have to retain some of the core philosophies that keep us and our clients safe and move all of us towards a happy publishing future.